All right, let's get going. My name is Caleb Allmeyer. I'm the founder of Helping Captives. Thank you guys so much for coming and signing up for this training. This training is signs to look for, identifying signs of grooming and trafficking, and what to do if you suspect that somebody is at risk. This is a really important training, and I'm really excited that you guys are taking the time to sign in and go through this so that you can learn how to help people and really just be more educated on what trafficking looks like and how people are grooming our kids and our women in our community that are being trafficked. So to start with, if you guys don't know much about Helping Captives is a Christian anti-trafficking and support organization. We're located up in the Spokane, Washington, northern Idaho region. We exist to honor God by providing opportunities for freedom and safety to those that have been exploited by sex trafficking, and we do that through prevention, intervention, and recovery services. Many women that end up in lifelong abuse or addicted and even might even die in the life. And so our organization empowers people to fight trafficking and help survivors in our community by providing a safe place to heal and breathe. So to break down those three things with prevention, intervention, and recovery services, first thing we do with prevention really is education and awareness. We want to put a lot of time and energy and effort as an organization into trying to stop kids from being trafficked. So we put a lot of energy into just awareness of trafficking. Also, we put time and energy into just sharing a lot about what we do as an agency and getting our name out there so that if somebody is being trafficked, they know who we are, they know our name, they know that we're trustworthy, and they know who to reach out to when they find themselves in that situation. Finally, as you move into intervention and recovery services, intervention is going to be more of that immediate situation of trying to respond to them, trying to go and get them from the airport or finding them locally and going and picking them up, getting them through the initial intake process of getting into our recovery program. And then obviously our recovery services are going to include case management, counseling, classes, support groups, things of that nature before we help exit them into long-term programming. What we're going to be covering today is a quick review of sex trafficking, talking about what grooming is, and then finally what to do if you suspect somebody is being groomed or trafficked, and also how to identify trafficking victims. So what is sex trafficking? Sex trafficking is an organized activity which primarily forces adults and minors into engaging into a commercial sex act through force, fraud, or coercion. So force, fraud, and coercion are the main three things that you're going to be able to differentiate sex trafficking through sex work. So sex work is if somebody's choosing to do it, to do commercial sex work, and then sex trafficking is if somebody's being forced to do it, or they're being frauded or tricked and manipulated to do it, or coercion. So if somebody's holding something over their head or saying, if you don't do this, we're not going to give you X amount of food, or potentially threatening of violence, that would be coercion. And so those three things really matter. So if somebody's being forced or frauded or coerced to perform commercial sex acts against their will, that's sex trafficking. And if they're a minor or they're under 18 and they're doing commercial sex work, that's automatically a trafficking case. What's grooming? Grooming is establishing a relationship with a child or a person with the intention of building trust in order to manipulate them into sexual activities. The predator prepares the child for a meeting, especially via an internet chat room, with the intention of committing a sexual offense. So again, it's establishing a relationship with a person with the intent of building trust so that you can manipulate them into sexual activities. And that's really what we're going to focus on today. The first thing I want to point out is some needs that we all have. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is really important to understand because we all need this. And people that are grooming women or kids, they're looking at these things that every one of us needs. And so if a woman or a kid needs water, food, shelter, sleep, or clothing, and they're not getting it, then they're going to exploit that need. And they're going to try and they're basically going to find whatever that need is, and then they're going to promise that they can give that person that need if they would sell themselves. So if it's water, food, shelter, that's one thing. But then you move up and you realize that, everybody also needs personal security. They need finances. They need resources. And ultimately, they need love and belonging. And that's a big one that they exploit, is the love and belonging, is that they also will find kids that just want intimacy, they want family, they want to feel loved, they want to feel like they're a part of something. And if they're not getting those needs met at home, these guys that are grooming people will exploit that. And the big way that they exploit that now is online. They don't even need to talk to your kids in person, unfortunately. Now in the world that we live in, 85% of the ways that groomers are going to be connecting with people is online, through just social media, maybe a game chat room. Kids are online. I saw a stat the other day that a teenager spent about 9 hours a day online. So your kids are online, and that's the easiest way that people can now communicate with them. 10% might be pre-existing relationships, and only about 4% are going to be grooming people that are on the street, or in a bar or in a club. So you can see how online is going to be something that we're going to talk a lot about, because that's where our kids are spending time, and wherever our kids are at, that's where the predators are going to be at. Since the pandemic, online recruitment has increased exponentially, whereas there are vulnerable people. Wherever there's vulnerable people in communities, there's going to be someone who finds a way to exploit them. So again, wherever the kids are at is where their groomers are going to be. Grooming and recruitment tactics used by traffickers and predators. Groomers are not always strangers online. They can be people you know, trust, and bring into your house. And that's really unfortunate. But we do know that 1 out of 3 women is sexually abused now by the time that they're 18, and 1 out of 5 boys is abused by the time that they're 18. And the majority of people that get abused is by somebody they know, whether that be somebody's uncle or just they might be hanging out at a birthday party, and so you just never really know. You need to be aware of who your kids are hanging out with, and you might feel like you trust their parents, but you don't necessarily know what their kids are watching, who's coming in and out of the house. So it's just, unfortunately, groomers are not always strangers. They're a lot of times people that they might know. They're skilled in psychological manipulation. They know how to connect, identify what the victim wants. Again, going back to the hierarchy of needs, they know how to identify what that victim needs, and they know how to build trust, and so that they can move and get what they want quickly. So again, it's all about trying to figure out what the need is, so that they can build trust, so that they can eventually exploit them and sell them for sexual stuff. Build trust through use. They'll build the trust through use of gifts, through attention, through sharing secrets, and training them to keep secrets. It's a big thing that we're going to talk about later on, but talking to your kids about not keeping secrets, that if somebody ever talks to your kid and say, hey, this is a secret we need to keep, that should be a red flag for your kid to come and talk to you about that. That's a big thing that they're going to do, is try and build trust and then isolate. That's something that you just need to be aware of. Build relationships to form a strong bond. They convince that they care more than anyone else. Again, that's part of the isolation, is trying to build trust and then isolate them from people that are actually there to keep them safe. They're going to encourage isolation and separation from friends and family. They're going to try and make the family the enemy and say things like, they don't understand you like I do. Again, all of it is to build trust and then isolate. And then they're going to start testing boundaries and kind of getting them ready over sexualized, such as desensitizing them, talking about sexual behaviors, introducing them to porn. A lot of these women might get introduced to the club life, and just trying to get them around some of the just exposure of maybe going to a strip club, or just the over-sexualization of younger kids, maybe playing the red light, green light game, which is where they will start touching them at a location, and they'll say green light, and then as they'll say red light to stop, and just trying to get them just overstimulated and trying to learn or understand sexuality. And that might start touching ways that seem harmless, hugging, wrestling, tickling, the massage, but then eventually it leads into sexual touch. So again, the end game is for them to get the kid to build trust with them, to then isolate them, to then begin doing sexual activity so that they can exploit them. And ultimately, sometimes the end game might be to meet them in person or exploit them with videos. So a lot of this might also be online. They might build a friendship with somebody online, and then the end game is they want to eventually meet them in person. Signs your child is at risk of being groomed. These are some signs, and we're going to talk about the grooming part first, and then this is the grooming is before they get trafficked. So we're going to have some signs that your kid might be of risk is being groomed, and then eventually signs if a kid might be actually being trafficked. So they're grooming, they could be talking about a new boyfriend or a friend that is a lot older. That's a sign. So if your kid is talking about this new boyfriend that's significantly older than them, that's usually a massive red flag. There's no reason that a 13 or 14-year-old should be dating a 17, 18, 19-year-old. If they're infatuated or having a crush on an older family friend and may spend time with them, texting them, etc. We've had stories of even guys that go to church and they're a family friend and they're in their 30s and they're spending a lot of time with their friend's high school daughter, and that daughter becomes infatuated and their parents think, oh, there's not a problem, they're just family friends, but the reality is that they're being groomed and there's more going on. Spending a lot of time online, especially in their room, or often locking the door, that could be a sign that they're being groomed. It might also be a sign that they're going through something in life, or maybe they're looking at pornography or something like that. So if they're spending a lot of time online, especially in the room, often locking the doors, that's a unique thing to just look out for, which is why a lot of parents now, when it's time to be at home, they put all their phones and devices on a dock in the living room, and so their kids don't have access to that when they're by themselves. And so if they want access to it, they have to go out in the living room and be on their phone. They don't allow the kids to take their phone and stuff into their room, which I think is really, really smart. Maybe their kids are being secretive or defensive when asked about their online activities. So that's always a red flag, right? When your kids are being secretive, or they get really defensive when you ask them what's going on with their phone. I think that's just in general in relationships, that's a red flag. If you ask your husband or your wife about their activities online and they start getting really defensive, that's usually a red flag as well, that they might be looking at porn or some other things like that. So signs your child is at risk of being groomed continuing. Maybe they're unwilling to discuss the internet use or pushes back on the online monitoring. If you sit down with your kid and say, hey, we want to be able to monitor your phone because we care about you, we love you, we want to make sure you're safe, and all of a sudden they're freaking out about it, it's probably because there's some things they don't want you to know. If they start overreacting when rules are put into place for online use or phone being taken away, again, we've been talking about that. If they start displaying suspicious behavior when you walk into the room, such as switching off their monitor, changing screens on their phone or computer, they could be getting groomed through the pornography or just the sexualization, or not, or somebody's talking to them, befriending them, trying to isolate them, and the kid doesn't want you to know that they're talking to them. So these are all kind of signs to be aware of like, hey, there's probably something going on. I'm not necessarily saying they're being trafficked at this point or they're even being groomed to be trafficked, but they might be into some situations that you want to make sure that you're looking out for. Those are all red flags if your kids are doing those things. If all of a sudden they have expensive new items that you did not buy, that they are unwilling to explain how they got, and their story doesn't add up, this is a significant red flag. If all of a sudden your kids are having all these new expensive items that you know that they didn't purchase, if all of a sudden their nails are done, their hair's done, they have new Jordans, they have new things that you know you didn't pay for them and they would not have any way of affording for them to get that, and they don't want to explain to you how they got that, that's a serious time to sit down with your child and begin having a conversation. Because if their story just doesn't add up, again, you got to remember the groomers, the whole idea is to build trust with them. And some of the ways they do that is through gifts and showing them that trying to teach them that they care, and then trying to tell your kid that they care more about them than you do. So just be very aware of that. If your kid has mood swings and volatile behaviors that are new and you don't understand the cause, again, massive sign. Using age-inappropriate sexual language. This is big, especially with young kids. If all of a sudden your kids are saying things that they shouldn't know, or talking about body parts that they shouldn't probably be talking about, or touching other kids or in other ways, it might be a significant sign that they're being abused. Or they're into something that you need to talk to them about, because they wouldn't naturally just understand that. If they're having sexualized behavior, including changes in the way they dress, what they're comfortable watching, all of those little things are important for us to be paying attention. We're going to move on from grooming of kind of ways that, again, that they're, this is going to be when they've moved from, a kid's moved from just building trust and being isolated to potentially now they're past that. They've met with somebody and they might be being sold at this point or trafficked, or they're being had sent somebody some photos. Because again, a lot of this is online. So somebody might not meet up with your kid. They might be talking to them, might be becoming best friends with them, trying to make them feel like they're best friends. And then all of a sudden try and, get that young person to send them nudes. And then if they get all those nude videos or pictures, now they might exploit them or blackmail them with that and say, hey, now you need to keep sending me these photos or send me money, or I'm going to send this to all of your friends, and it never stops. So at this point, if they're in this situation, this could be a sign that they're being trafficked. So if they're under 18 and they're providing any type of commercial sex acts, obviously that's the biggest one. They're being trafficked. If they're under 18 and providing any type of commercial sex acts, you will know that legally they are being trafficked. This is a big one. If they have multiple phones, this is a huge, huge red flag. If your kid doesn't just have the phone that you're providing for them, but now they have another phone and they have to answer it every single time somebody calls, that's a huge red flag. I mean, somebody gave them a phone and now they're required to do that. Again, might not mean that they're being trafficked, could be getting into gang activity. You don't know, but these are significant red flags that you need to be aware of. If they begin keeping secrets from you, massive red flag. If they start having extremely vague answers to questions and things just are never adding up, massive red flag. If they start isolating from you, your friends, your community, your church, massive red flag, because again, the groomer's job is to build trust with them and then isolate them. So if you start seeing any of these things, massive red flags. If they stop attending school or you see a drop in grades, that's a red flag. Also could just mean that they're going through something. But again, we need to understand and be involved in our kids' lives. So if we see them, all of a sudden their friend groups are changing or their grades are significantly dropping, it usually means something else is going on in their life. If they have sudden dramatic change in behavior or they start running away from home, again, that could be somebody on the telling them to do these things because they could be blackmailing them or trying to isolate them so that they can sell them. If they're engaged in commercial sex acts or sex work or prostitution, that's more of an obvious one. But obviously, if you're seeing those things, they could be getting forced, frauded, or coerced into it. Are they disoriented, confused, or showing signs of mental or physical abuse? That could be a possible sign that they're being trafficked. Do they have unexplained bruises in various stages that are in various stages of healing, which means that it's continually happening, not just like they got a bruise from playing softball, but constantly different bruises showing up on their bodies. That could be a significant sign of physical abuse. Are they fearful, timid, or submissive? And you're going to run into kids that are just naturally more fearful, timid, or submissive. But if all of a sudden you have a child that is not overly submissive and now they're completely changing their behavior and they're fearful or timid or really submissive, and that's not typically how they are, then you know something's probably going on and changing because they're completely changing their behavior. Are there signs of them being denied food, medical care, water, sleep? These are significant signs to be aware of. Are they often with the same person that they defer to that seems in control of them or their life or their answers? So most of the time a trafficker is going to be in complete control of the person's life. So if all of a sudden that they're asked questions and they keep deferring to another person to answer it for them, that's a red flag. Especially if you're a school counselor or you're dealing with something like that and they never want to answer a question, they're always deferring to somebody else, you should understand that's not typical, that's not normal. And if they kind of appear to you that they're being coached on what to say, that's another red flag. And again, you're an intelligent person. You you will kind of understand and know, like, a lot of these, especially these kids, they're children. You're an adult. You have more life experience. So if you feel like what they're saying to you just seems to be coached and it just something seems off, we need to pry into that a little bit more and look into it. Again, I'm not saying if every one of these signs that comes up means that somebody's being trafficked, but if you start seeing multiple of these signs, big red flag. Living in unsuitable conditions. Again, like if somebody's in poverty or they're homeless and they're living in unsuitable conditions, that might not mean they're being trafficked. But when you start adding multiple of these things together, there could be a significant chance that it's happening. If they have lack of personal possessions and have an unstable living environment, if somebody is always controlling everything that they have, are they free to leave where they live without having to check in with somebody and always tell someone where they are? If it's not their parents, because you can understand if it's your parent, I want to know where my kids are at and they better be checking in. But if they have to be checking in with somebody constantly telling them every little thing that they're doing, those are some big red flags. If they have a lot of unexplained cash or they have concerning brands or tattoos. So we showed some pictures of some tattoos. A lot of times traffickers will literally brand the ones that they're trafficking with their names, barcodes. They might have a 304 tattooed on them, which is, if you flip it around upside down, it spells the word hoe. And so sometimes a lot of the women will have a 304 tattooed on them. So if you see a 304 tattoo on somebody, or a lot of different kind of crowns based with somebody's name or initials, oftentimes that could mean that they have a pimp or they have a trafficker. Signs your child may have experienced a trauma. These are also just really important for us to know as parents. If all of a sudden there's a quick and drastic change in attitude and behaviors, we all want to know that. That means that potentially something's happened in their life. It could have happened at home. It could happen at school. You just don't know. If all of a sudden their behaviors start to change, or they're really good at school, or really good at having conversations with you, and now they're having a really hard time paying attention, it means something might have happened, or there's other things on their minds. And it's a sign that they might have experienced trauma. So you want to be able to understand. And most of these things, if you're just really involved in your kids' lives and you know your children, especially dads, if you're involved with your daughters and you're actually dating them and spending time with them and engaged in their life, you're going to notice when things are not adding up, their personality starts changing. If there's change in eating patterns, change in sleep, and change in their energy, if their grades just significantly drop and they were really good at school, they start, again, isolating from friends and family, because that's all part of grooming. Build trust, isolate. I'm going to keep saying it over and over until it's just drained into your brain. This is what they do. They want to build trust, and they do that in all sorts of different ways, and then they begin to isolate so that they can sell them for sex. New group of friends that are very different from previous friends. That's a big one. I know for me, when I went to a different school and all of a sudden I completely changed my friends group, it was because I was getting in a lot of trouble. And I was going through some mental stuff just and going through life. And, my parents kind of figured out what was going on when I had a completely different friend group, because then my parents even asked my old friends, hey, what's going on with my son at school? And they can catch on pretty quickly that, I'm not doing well. And so again, knowing who your kids are and who their friends are is extremely important. If they have a loss of enjoyment in things they used to enjoy, that's a big sign of something going on in their life. If your kid really, really loves basketball, and then all of a sudden she just doesn't want to play it, there might have even been a trauma that happened at the basketball practice. And so just knowing hey, that's not typical, that's not normal. I want to talk to my daughter and sit down and talk with her, or even my son. If they start using substances, lots of times they're trying to numb something, or they're trying to fit in or something like that. So again, if they start using substances, good time to sit down and start having questions. If you're a younger kid and they start having anxiety, so in a young child that looks like an upset tummy, trouble sleeping, afraid when they're not with their parents. If you got a young kid that all of a sudden is really, really scared to not be around your parents, or you're taking them to a certain house and they're terrified, you need to pay attention to that and start asking questions and teaching your kids that we don't keep secrets, and that no matter what happens, your kid is safe to come and talk to you. Those are big things to be aware of. Talk to your kid about the relationships with adults. These are some things that we all need to do. You're the parent, and it's okay for you to ask your kids, how did you meet? What do you guys talk about? Do you ever feel uncomfortable and confused with them? Do they buy you presents? Do they buy you candy and ice cream? If I was you, I'd be taking a snap on my phone of this slide right here and just having these questions available. If they're hanging out with these adults, you should be able to ask your kid these questions at any time. And just remember, you're the parent, they're the kids. You have a right to ask these questions. Again, I'm going to go through them. I think they're important to know. How did you meet this person? What do you talk about? Do you ever feel uncomfortable and confused with them? Do they buy you presents? Are they trying to build trust? These are questions that we should all be ready to ask at any given point. If all of a sudden you find out that their kids are uncomfortable or you're uncomfortable with the situation, eliminate their access to your child. That's your kid. Even if your kid whines about it, it doesn't matter. Your first job is to keep your kids safe. And I wish that with what we do as a job, that more parents understood this, and that they would have just eliminated their kid might have been being abused from a family member or something, and instead of listening to their kid and eliminating this access from somebody to their child, they just kept the access to their child available, and because they didn't want to hurt their kid, or the kid was already being groomed and had all this trust with this person, and so now they're saying, Mom, you just don't trust me. Listen, if something's going on or something feels awkward in your heart, that's your kid. You can totally eliminate access of an adult to your child. Offer a safe space for your child to talk about the relationship without judgment or reaction. This is a huge one, especially if somebody has naked photos of a kid and they're using those against them. They might be terrified to have that conversation with you, to say what's going on, or maybe your kid's addicted to pornography. We need to be able to let them come and talk to us and share what's going on in their life so that we can keep them safe without freaking out. And it might be really hard because you're internally just wanting to lose your mind, but you have got to be safe for them to feel comfortable to come talk to you. You got to be able to keep open and safe lines of communication with your kids. Point out inconsistencies in the predator's words or actions. If you're seeing something, it's okay to sit down with your kids and start pointing out these inconsistencies of things that your kids are telling you, or things that they're forwarding on, of saying, this is what this relationship's looking like, this is what this person's telling me, and they're younger kids, and you can see already inconsistencies in some of the things that the kid's telling you. Point that out to them, let them understand and show them. And I think unfortunately live in a world where we need to be talking to our kids about this. I think as soon as your kids hit junior high, it's like all culture is just slamming sexuality down their throat. And if we're not sitting there talking to our kids about this, of what's right, what's wrong, and also just how these things work, so that they're aware of signs to look out for themselves, they could be very vulnerable. Encourage them to get away from the abuser if they're ever in a situation like that. Just that they're valued, that they're worth so much more than that. To try and get away. Be patient and be prepared. Educate yourself on this stuff so you can talk with your kids more. Ensure your safety and theirs when trying to help. Seek advice from trusted agencies like us, or the police, or Rescue America, or just different entities. Obviously, if you're in the United States, the crime check or the police department is going to be the main one. But if you find out that your kid or something's happening like that, make sure that they're safe. What to do if I know or suspect a minor is being trafficked and groomed? Listen, if you know that they're a minor and they're being trafficked, you call 911 immediately. And you use the word trafficking. So many times people will call the police department and they go, I think this is happening, or this might be going on. If you know, you don't just say, hey, she's being hurt, or she's had her items lost. You say, I think she's being trafficked. I mean, they're going to be ready to rock and roll on that. The police department, especially where we live, man, they don't want to see this stuff happening, but you got to use the word trafficked. not say she's being a prostitute or a 12-year-old prostitute. Clearly describe the victim and the trafficker, and then clear details. Say, here's the clothing, here's the cart, here's the plate number, here's the jewelry she's wearing, here's the tattoos on them, so they can look for the right person. If you think they're being trafficked, don't just say, hey, I think there's a kid out here, a young girl that's being prostituting herself. That's not going to make them maybe jump on the call and run out there immediately. But if you use the word trafficked, they will. So again, don't be afraid to use that. And you don't know when you're saving somebody's life. If you feel like something's off, just call Crime Check, all right? Here's the number. It's 509-456-2233. Call them immediately. If you think something's off, just contact them immediately. If they are an adult and they've been and someone shared with you that they are being exploited, you can ask them if they want out of the life. Again, difference between sex work and sex trafficking is there's got to be force, fraud, or coercion. So if somebody's in sex work, or say they're working at a strip club, or they're doing anything commercial sex work, and they're choosing that, you're not gonna. It's got to be their choice to come out of the life. It might not be something you want for them. It might be something that you, as a Christian, want for them. But at the end of the day, it's something that they need out of. But if if you ask them if they want out of the life and they do, then the easiest thing is honestly just go to our website, and there's a whole page right at the top at helpingcaptives.org. It says Get Help Now right at the top, and it gives you all the different options of who to call. If it's late at night, we have 24-hour hotlines for you to contact. So just go to visit helpingcaptives.org and go to Get Help Now. Remember, they may not know they're being trafficked, but think they're helping a boyfriend. Be mindful. They often love him and will think you are the enemy trying to get them to leave. So again, because the groomers or traffickers, so they put so much time into trying building trust and isolating them and getting them into it, desensitizing into it, they often don't even see themselves as being trafficked. They even think of trafficking as like somebody being kidnapped or sold overseas, and they think that they're just helping a boyfriend out. When you know that they're being tricked or manipulated into commercial sex work, they might not see it that way. So remember, just to be aware of that and how you communicate that to them, and asking them questions like, hey, are you in the life? Hey, do you ever feel like you're being forced to do this? Do you ever feel like you're being tricked into this? Would you ever want help out of the life? And trying to connect them with a local resource like us would be really, really helpful. And ideally, if you can get them to call us and talk to some of our staff or an agency, that would be the most ideal situation. Again, this one's hard, but you can't work harder than somebody if they're not willing to get help. We have, when we first opened up our hotline, 90% of the phone calls we get to our hotline weren't even victims of trafficking or women that were trying to get out. It was usually grandma or a sister, and they wanted their sibling or they wanted their granddaughter to get out of doing commercial sex work, and the daughter or granddaughter did not want to get out of commercial sex work. And you can pray for them. We believe in prayer. We believe put Bible verses on your television. Put Bible verses in your mirror when you get ready, and pray and declare scriptures over them, and let God move on their life so that they will be willing to get out of it. But if they don't want to get out of it, it's really, really hard, because they're not going to make it through a program. They got to want out. And that's really, really hard on families, especially when you really, really want them out. Now, if they're younger or they have a good relationship with you, you can make them get out. I mean, if they're a minor, it's not their choice. You're their parent. I'm talking about like adult women. It sometimes can be really challenging. Again, remember, if you're going and talking to them, that they're often being watched, or they're followed, or their phone's being tracked or monitored. I mean, these are all things that we have to do with our intake when we respond to somebody and get them. There's a whole intake process, which includes putting their phones in Faraday bags, even scanning their stuff for trackers or themselves for trackers. Like, you just have to be aware that a lot of times that somebody's probably watching them. But that's the number one way that we see people get out of the life is when people are trained and understand this stuff, and then they see it and they lovingly go and talk with somebody and they ask them questions, and then they try and point them into getting help. Helping or approaching a stranger you feel is being trafficked in public can lead to them getting really massively hurt or facing consequences from the pimp. So again, if you're seeing something in public and you feel like they're being abused or trafficked, you're better off calling the police department than walking up, because what'll happen is if she's fearful or that guy's been threatening her life and all of a sudden you walk up and start asking her questions, she's going to be worried she's going to get beat. And so again, you got to be aware of this stuff. Always ensure your safety and theirs when you're trying to help. How to identify possible sex trafficking victims in a professional environment. We do have if you're working in a professional environment like a hospital or something like that, we do have a separate training that won't be online, but it would be something that our staff would come and do a training for you. Let us know. But again, these are some things to be aware of. Like if you're working at a school or you're working at an emergency room or something like that, and you have to have contact with somebody. If they walk in, they're super fearful or they're anxious or they're depressed or they're very, very submissive with somebody, and that person's answering all the questions for them, or they're super nervous or paranoid. Again, try and isolate them from that person so you can begin to ask questions. If they exhibit unusual behavior after bringing up if you bring up contacting law enforcement. Now, law enforcement is getting trained to start looking at these women as victims, but back in the day, they used to arrest them. And so oftentimes they're very nervous to open up and talk about it. Now we have victim advocates on law enforcement and FBI that literally come out and just talk to these women and try and help them. If they're having a really hard time keeping eye contact with you, avoiding eye contact is a big thing. They're actually trained to not look somebody in the eye. It's part of the training that the pimps will do. So if they're really struggling with keeping eye contact with you, that's a red flag. If they're not utilizing access to healthcare, if they appear malnourished, if they show signs of physical or sexual abuse, physical restraint, confinement, or torture, those are all really big red flags. If they're not allowed to speak for themselves, if there's a third party may insist on being present and or translating, just get them away. Get them away from the third party thing. They need to be able to talk for themselves. This is a big red flag. If they're always asking somebody to answer for them, or they don't know what city they're in, oftentimes they won't even know where they're at. These traffickers will bring them around, so they might get addicted to drugs or OD, and they ended up having to go through medical detox or something like that. And if you're working in medical detox and they don't even know what city they're in, there's always somebody there trying to answer questions. That's a big red flag. It has numerous inconsistencies in their story. They're not in control of their own ID or passport, or they don't have any. Those are big red flags. And if they're always constantly multiple visits for abortions, pregnancies, and or STDs, again, pretty big red flags. So that concludes our training. If you want to know how you can help, here's some ways. Biggest thing, pray. The number one thing we can do is we can pray. We can pray that God reaches in, that God talks to people, that you can be praying for the law enforcement, you're praying for agencies like ours, that we're able to stay open, that we're able to have wisdom and understanding of how to do our job. So please spread the word. I think the biggest thing is to spread the word about these trainings so that everybody can be trained and understand what these signs look like. And then also by spreading the word, if somebody is being trafficked and they keep hearing the name Helping Captives, when it's time for them to get out, they will reach out to us. They'll know who or where to reach out. So we are constantly trying to put as much time and attention into spreading awareness about trafficking to keep kids from being trafficked, and also just getting our name out there so that people that are being trafficked will know who to reach out to. Share our social media posts. If you're on social media a lot, just feel free to share them. If we're posting something about signs to look for, be sharing those. Connect us with your school, your organization, or even your church. We love going in and doing trainings and talking to people. And if you have an entire group of people that you're like, man, they really need to be trained on this stuff, we want to work with you. We want to be able to get as many people trained in our community as possible so that we can make an impact and we can put a dent in this. Decreased demand. What I mean by that is a lot of, especially I'm talking to guys that are on here, the porn industry fuels trafficking. So if you're addicted to porn, you have to understand that you're increasing demand. there's so many young girls and women that we talk to that they will get forced or manipulated to do pornography videos. And if you're addicted to porn, you don't know if somebody's being forced, frauded, or coerced to go perform that commercial sex work for you on the screen. So we've got to begin to decrease demand. Things that are places that people are potentially being trafficked in our community, we got to be willing to shut those things down. Policies and law, you got to vote. You got to understand that you have a voice, that there's been a lot of people that have died for your right to have a voice, and we want you to be able to use that to understand what policies and laws. There's a website called Shared Hope, and we encourage everybody to go on there and see what policies are coming up that impact people's lives in this area. You can give financially. Helping organizations stay open that are fighting this is extremely important, because if they're not open and there aren't no recovery services, then there's nowhere for these women to go once they get out of the life. You can donate smaller gift cards from Uber, Lyft, grocery stores, fast food, for us to be able to help women get to us. You can sponsor our events. You can volunteer at our events. Those are some really significant ways that you can help. But I think the biggest thing is just helping get the word out, and helping people get trained is so important. If you are a thrift store shopper, go into our thrift store and buying clothes. All the profit from the thrift store actually helps us pay the mortgages on the buildings that we utilize to keep these women safe and to do all of our services through. If you're a coffee drinker, just go buy our coffee. Visit hccoffeeco.com and they'll ship it straight to your house. Or you can buy some at the thrift store. So thank you guys so much for going through this training. Seriously, it means the world to us that you would take time out of your busy day and your lunch break to spend time with us, to learn a little bit more, to be trained on this, because you never know when you could save somebody's life.